Welcome back to the deep dive. We are back at the table, and today we are tackling a subject that, I'm not going to lie to you, made my brain cramp up a little bit while reading the prep materials.
It's a heavy lift today. There's no way around it.
It is a heavy lift, but it's also, and I don't use this word lightly, potentially life-changing. We are looking at a stack of books, articles, and essays that basically ask us to take the furniture of our minds, specifically regarding religion, history, and the universe, and just rearrange it completely.
That's a renovation of the worldview. A total gut job in some ways.
Exactly. We are diving into the concept of the cosmic Christ, or as some of our sources call it, the universal Christ. Now, this is primarily based on the work of Richard Rohr, a Franciscan friar whose book, The Universal Christ, is sort of the anchor here.
Right, that's the main text.
But we've also got supporting insights from the scientist and theologian Elysian, who really brings in the cosmic scale of it all. And because we need to keep things honest, we have some pretty fierce counter-arguments from critics like Matthew Dowling and Philip St. Romain.
It's a diverse stack. You have the mystics, the scientists, and the skeptics all in one room, which is where the most interesting conversations happen.
So let's start with the hook. Let's start with the name that is arguably the most famous name in human history, Jesus Christ.
Right.
I want to pause on that name for a second, because I think for 90, maybe 95% of people, and I include myself in this for most of my life, when we hear Jesus Christ, it registers as a first name and a last name.
Absolutely.
Like John Smith or Mary Jones.
Exactly. Like he was born and Joseph and Mary went to the Roman DMV and signed the birth certificate. First name Jesus, last name Christ.
Right. And maybe if you're a little more church, you think, okay, well, Christ means Messiah, the anointed one. But functionally, in our heads, it's his surname. It identifies him as a single individual who lived in a specific place at a specific time.
That is the default setting for Western culture. But the core premise of the sources we are looking at today, especially Rohr, is that if you think Christ is a last name, you have fundamentally misunderstood the entire religion. You've missed the point entirely.
That's a bold claim to say that billions of people have missed the point.
It is. But the argument here is that Christ isn't a name, it's a title. And actually, it's more than a title. It is a description of a cosmic reality, a reality that is much, much bigger than a single human lifespan.
So the mission for this deep dive is to unpack that claim. We are going to explore the idea that God has been in everything since the Big Bang, not just, watching from the sidelines, but actually in it, permeating it.
And to do that, we have to look at history. We have to trace a thread that suggests Christianity might have taken let's call it a narrow path or a detour back in the Middle Ages.
A wrong turn.
Or at least a detour, yeah. A detour that focused heavily, almost exclusively, on cleaning up sin and kind of forgot the original plan, which our sources argue was always about eternal love.
And just to warn you, listening right now, we are going to get into some mind-bending territory. We're going to ask, what if the Christ isn't just a person, but the blueprint for the entire physical universe? What if the stars, the trees, your dog, and even you are all part of this Christ mystery?
But, and I want to emphasize this early on, we're also going to look at why that idea scares some people, why critics think it's dangerous. Because if everything is Christ, then is Jesus special anymore? Does that diminish him?
That's the tension. That's the whole ball game. Okay, let's jump into section 1, defining the terms. Because if Christ isn't a last name, what on earth is it?
So Richard Rohr makes a very sharp, very specific distinction in his work. He distinguishes between Jesus and the Christ.
Okay, break that down for me, because to my ear, they are the same guy.
For Rohr, they are related, absolutely, but they aren't identical in scope. Jesus is the historical figure, the man from Nazareth. He lived for about 33 years. He walked on dusty roads. He ate fish. He had a physical body that was limited in time and space.
He couldn't be in Egypt and Jerusalem at the same time. He had to walk from one to the other.
Exactly. He was particular. He was a specific data point. Rohr calls him a micro-incarnation. But the Christ is eternal. It's a cosmic principle. And Rohr calls this the first incarnation.
Wait, first, you're implying Jesus was the second.
Correct. And this is the key to the whole perspective. This is the first piece of furniture we have to move. Rohr argues that the first incarnation, the first time God decided to materialize and become physical, to unite with matter, wasn't in a manger in Bethlehem 2,000 years ago.
Okay, so when was it?
It was Genesis 1, verse 3. Let there be light. The Big Bang.
So the moment the universe exploded into existence, that was God becoming Christ. That was the first time God took on a body.
Yes. The argument is that the Christ is the eternal principle of God's love for matter. It's a blueprint for reality, where spirit and matter are always meant to be together. So as Rohr writes, the Christ started at the Big Bang. Jesus emerged 2,000 years ago.
Okay, I need to process that, because that changes the timeline completely. It's not a religious timeline anymore, it's a scientific one.
It is. Think about the scope. Science tells us the universe is roughly 13.8 billion years old. Give or take a few million years.
Right, an unimaginable amount of time.
And Jesus of Nazareth appeared 2,000 years ago. If you map that onto a 24-hour clock representing all of history, Jesus shows up at like 1 second to midnight.
It's the last frame of the movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so if you believe that God only started participating in the physical world with the birth of Jesus, then you have to ask a very uncomfortable question. What was God doing for the first 13.799 billion years?
Just watching rocks cool down, waiting for the primates to evolve so he could finally get involved.
Was the universe just empty space? Was it devoid of God's presence? Just a cosmic accident waiting for a purpose? Rohr argues that if Christ is only Jesus, then the vast majority of cosmic history was a godless vacuum. But the universal Christ view says, no, God loves matter. Matter isn't separate from spirit or an obstacle to spirit. Matter is the vehicle for spirit.
There's an analogy in the notes that I found helpful. It compared the Christ to the scope of a whole project, like the blueprint for a cathedral, and Jesus to the cornerstone, or the beautiful stained glass window that lets you see the light inside.
I like the macro and micro analogy. The Christ is the macro reality, the universal truth that God is in everything. Jesus is the micro reality, the personal human-sized face that allows us to connect with and understand that massive, overwhelming mystery.
Because you can't talk to a universe. You can't have a personal relationship with a cloud of hydrogen gas or a supernova.
Right. It's too big, too abstract. Jesus gives the cosmic mystery a name, a face, a story, and a heart. But the mystery was already there before the face appeared.
Now, I have to play the skeptic here immediately, because when you say God is in the rocks or God is in the trees, that sounds a lot like pantheism. And I know enough from my basic religious education to know that pantheism is usually considered a no-no in Orthodox Christianity. It's a heresy.
You are spot on. And the critics in our stack, people like Philip St. Romain, they broke this up immediately. They say, hey, wait a minute, are you saying the rock is God? Because that's pantheism.
God is everything, and everything is God.
Right. Which means if the universe disappeared, God would disappear. God is identical with a sum total of physical reality. That's pantheism. But Rohr and Elysian are very, very careful to distinguish their view. They are talking about panentheism.
Panentheism. Okay, that N sounds important.
It's the whole thing. It's Greek for in.
Okay.
Panentheism says God is in all things, and all things are in God. But, and this is the key, God is also more than the universe. God transcends the universe.
Help me visualize that. Give me an analogy.
The classic one is a sponge in the ocean. The sponge is fully saturated with water. The water is in every pore of the sponge, and the sponge itself is floating in the water. You can't separate them. But the sponge is not the ocean. The ocean is vast and extends far, far beyond the sponge.
So the universe is the sponge.
And God is the ocean. God permeates every atom, sustaining it, loving it from the inside. But God isn't limited to the collection of atoms. If the universe blinked out of existence, God would still be God.
That distinction seems crucial, because it protects the idea that God is still, well, God, not just another word for nature.
It protects God's transcendence. He is bigger than us, while also affirming his immanence, that he is closer to us than our own breath. It holds those two things in tension.
And Rohr claims this isn't just modern, hippie theology from California, right? He claims this is actually buried deep in the Bible.
He goes straight to the source. He points to the Apostle Paul, particularly his letters from prison, specifically the letters to the Colossians and Ephesians. These are some of the most mystical parts of the New Testament.
There's a specific verse he leans on heavily, isn't there?
Colossians 1, verses 15 through 17. It's an early Christian hymn that Paul incorporates. He writes about Christ. He's the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation.
Firstborn of all creation, not firstborn of Mary. That's a huge difference.
It's a cosmic difference. And it goes on, for in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together.
In him all things hold together. That sounds like physics. Like it's describing the strong nuclear force or the law of gravity or something.
Rohr would say that Paul, in a moment of deep mystical insight, saw the Christ mystery. He saw that this divine, loving energy is the very matrix of reality. It's the glue of the universe. He saw the plan A before anyone else really articulated it.
But if Paul saw it, and you're saying some of the early church fathers and mystics saw it, where did it go? Why did I grow up in a church where Christianity was 90% about avoiding hell and 10% about being a nice person?
That is the million-dollar question. And that leads us right into section 2, the historical fork in the road. Because this isn't what most of us were taught.
Yeah, this part of the research fascinated me. I always assumed Christian theology was a straight line. You know, Jesus taught the disciples, they taught the next guys, and eventually we got the Pope and Billy Graham all saying the same thing.
It's definitely not a straight line. It's more like a branching tree with some major arguments along the way. And the sources describe 2 main branches, 2 competing teams, if you will, that have been arguing about the fundamental purpose of Christ for centuries.
Okay, so let's break them down. In the notes, we're calling them Plan A and Plan B.
Let's start with Plan B, because that is the one almost everyone in the West knows. This is the view that, for a variety of historical reasons, won the popularity contest.
This is the sin management view.
Right. This view is heavily influenced by St. Augustine in the 4th century, and then supercharged by the Protestant reformers in the 16th century. It focuses almost entirely on the narrative of the fall.
Genesis chapter 3. The garden, the snake, the apple.
The story goes, God created a perfect world. Adam and Eve were in paradise.
Yeah.
And then they disobeyed. They messed it up. Humans sinned. We broke the covenant and were cast out of the garden.
The car crashed into the ditch.
And because the car crashed, God had to react. He had to call a tow truck. His perfect plan was ruined, so he had to come up with a backup plan, a rescue plan.
And Jesus is the tow truck.
Precisely. In this view, the incarnation God becoming human is a rescue mission. It is a response to a problem that we created.
So the logic is, humans sinned, God's justice was offended, a debt was created. God sent Jesus to pay the debt and fix it.
And the catchphrase that sums it up perfectly is no sin, no Jesus.
So hypothetically, if Adam and Eve had never eaten the fruit, if they had just enjoyed the garden and followed the rules.
In the pure Plan B view, Jesus never would have come. He would have stayed in heaven as the eternal Son of God. He never would have become a baby, never would have walked on earth, never would have taught the Sermon on the Mount.
Because there was no mess to clean up. His whole purpose was remedial.
Right. Now, stop and think about the psychological impact of that theology. If that is your operating system, what is the center of your religion? What's the main character in the story?
The sin, the problem, our screw-up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It makes human badness the main driver of the entire divine story. We are the cause. God is the reaction. And it turns religion into a courtroom drama. I committed a crime. I owe a debt. I'm guilty. I can't pay it, so Jesus pays it for me. The judge bangs the gavel, and I'm declared not guilty.
It's transactional. It's a legal framework.
It is entirely transactional. It's about sin management. And let's be fair. This view provides a lot of comfort to a lot of people. I don't want to dismiss that.
How so?
Because it deals directly with the problem of guilt. We all feel broken. We all feel like we've messed up. A theology that says your debt is paid, you are legally clear, the case is closed, is very, very relieving. It's like getting a letter from the bank saying your mortgage is canceled.
That is a good feeling. I'd like the letter.
It is. But the sources we're looking at, like Rohr and Delio, argue it's a narrow view. It reduces the magnificent cosmic mystery of the incarnation to a mop-up operation for human failure.
Okay, so that's Plan B, the dominant story. But the sources introduce this other character, a guy I had never heard of before, John Duns Scotus.
The subtle doctor, a brilliant mind.
Who was he, and why was he so important?
He was a Franciscan theologian in the late 13th and early 14th centuries, a contemporary of Aquinas, but from a different school of thought. He was brilliant. And he looked at this Plan B logic, which was already popular back then, and he said, wait a minute, I don't buy it. This doesn't sound like the God I believe in.
What was his objection? What was the flaw he saw?
He asked a fundamental question. Is God reactive? Does the almighty, all-knowing, all-loving creator of the universe let his single biggest move, the incarnation, depend on what a couple of fallible humans did in a garden?
It does make God seem a bit beholden to us, like we're calling the shots.
Scotus thought so. He argued from a different starting point. He said, God is absolute freedom and God is absolute love. And the very nature of love, think about this in your own life, is that it desires to share itself. Love wants to externalize. It wants to pour itself out. It wants a beloved, an other.
So God didn't create the world because he was bored or lonely. He created it as an object of his love.
And Scotus argued that God intended to become incarnate, to unite spirit and matter in the person of Christ from the very beginning. Before creation even started, before the possibility of sin even existed, it was always the goal.
So hold on, in Scotus's view, this plan A, if Adam and Eve had never sinned, if the world remained a perfect paradise,
Jesus still would have come.
Wow, okay, that's a radical thought.
He wouldn't have come to die on a cross because in a perfect world there would be no sin, violence, or death to atone for. But he would have come to be the crown of creation, to be the final glorious wedding point where the divine and the human, spirit and matter, become one in a visible, tangible way.
So the incarnation wasn't a plan B rescue mission, it was plan A all along. The absolute masterpiece of God's love story with creation.
The masterpiece, not the repair job.
That shifts the whole vibe of the story. It's a different emotional tone.
It's just everything. If you believe plan A, then you were not just saved from badness. You were loved into existence for the sake of union. The primary reason for your existence is love, not sin.
The universe isn't a crime scene you're being rescued from. It's a wedding venue you were invited to.
Exactly. It moves the entire framework from a legal one, crime and punishment, debt and payment, to a relational one, lover and beloved, union and communion.
And this is where the Franciscan tradition, following Scotus, really leans in. They say this view allows us to see the world, the physical world, differently.
Right. Because if the physical world was always intended to be the home of God, the vessel for the Christ, then the physical world is inherently holy. It's not a fallen, dirty place we're trying to escape.
It's the first body of God.
It is. And there's a quote from Teilhard de Chardin, a much later Jesuit priest and scientist who followed this line of thinking. He said, "There is nothing profane here below for those who know how to see."
Think about that. Nothing profane, the dirt, the water, the dog sleeping on the floor, the coffee in your cup. It's all part of the Plan A project. It's all shot through with divinity. It makes me think about how we treat nature. If nature is just a waiting room until we get to heaven, sort of temporary stage for the human drama, who cares if we trash it? But if nature is the body of God...
We'll get to that in the practical section, but yes, you were hitting the nail on the head. This theology has massive implications for ecology, for social justice, for everything.
But first, I want to go deeper into the nature of this God, because if God isn't the angry judge sitting on a throne waiting for a blood debt to be paid, who is he? What is the engine driving this loving Plan A?
Or who are they?
Oh, right, of course. The Trinity.
This brings us to section 3, the divine dance.
Now, I have to be honest, whenever theologians start talking about the Trinity, my eyes glaze over a bit. It feels like a math problem that doesn't add up. 1 + 1 + 1 = 1. It just feels abstract and irrelevant.
That's because you, like most Westerners, have been taught to view God as a substance, a noun, a static being, a singular entity sitting on a chair.
A guy with a beard on a cloud. That's the image we all get.
Right. But the sources, drawing on the early Greek Cappadocian fathers and later mystics like Richard of St. Victor, say we need to stop thinking of God as a noun and start thinking of God as a verb.
God is a verb. What does that mean?
God is a flow. God is a relationship. God is an event. The Greek word they use is perichoresis.
Perichoresis sounds like a dental procedure.
It shares a root with choreography. It literally means dancing around, the divine dance.
I like that image better. A dance is dynamic. It's alive.
The idea is that the Godhead is not a static monarch, but a dynamic, eternal flow of love. The Father empties himself entirely into the Son. The Son receives that love and empties himself entirely into the Spirit. The Spirit receives that love and empties it back into the Father. It is the constant spinning water wheel of love, outpouring and receiving, kenosis, self-emptying.
So God isn't a lonely dictator in the sky. God, in God's very self, is a community of love.
Yes, and this is where the law of three comes in. This is a fascinating bit of logic from a 12th century mystic named Richard of St. Victor. It's brilliant.
Walk us through it.
Okay, so Richard said, if God is truly love, in the deepest sense of the word, God cannot be one, because you can't love in a vacuum. Loving only yourself isn't love. That's just narcissism.
Okay, that makes sense. So you need at least two. A lover and a beloved.
Right. But Richard said, even with two, there is a danger. The two can become a closed loop, just the two of us against the world. It can become an egoism, a do, a shared selfishness.
We've all seen couples like that. They're so into each other, they block everyone else out.
Exactly. So Richard argued, for love to be perfect, for it to be utterly generous, open, and joyous, it needs a third. The third person opens the circle, It turns the straight line between two into a triangle. It creates a shared gaze, something to delight in together.
The third makes it a party. It keeps the love flowing outward instead of just back and forth.
The third creates a we that is inherently open and generative. Here's the aha moment that Rohr really hammers home in his book.
I'm ready.
The Trinity isn't a closed club. The divine dance is so full of creative, loving energy that it spills over. It can't contain itself. It explodes outward. That explosion is creation.
The Big Bang. We're back to the Big Bang.
The Big Bang is the dance spilling onto the cosmic dance floor. And the implication is we are the fourth.
We are invited into the dance.
We are already in it. We were born into it. We just don't know it. Rohr says God is a flow and invites us into full participation. The whole universe is the dance floor.
So we aren't standing on the wall watching God dance from a distance.
No, we are the partners. Creation is God's dance partner.
This radically changes the idea of prayer, doesn't it?
Completely. In the judge model, the plan B model, prayer is often begging. It's petitioning. Please, sir, look at me. Please grant my request. I need this.
You're throwing a message in a bottle up to the sky and hoping someone reads it.
But in the flow model, prayer is simply tuning in. It's realizing you are already in the river of love. It's less about talking to God and more about participating in the conversation that is already happening. It's breathing. You are entering the stream of love that is already flowing through you and all things.
It sounds so much more relaxing, less performative.
It is. It's about connection rather than transaction. It's not about changing God's mind. It's about changing your own, about opening yourself to the flow that's already there.
And here comes the but. Again, because this is where my modern cynical brain kicks in. This sounds lovely. It sounds beautiful. A divine dance, plan A, we're all stardust and love. But if I'm a critic listening to this, I'm thinking this is too easy.
Too soft. Too nice.
Yeah. If we are all in the dance and we are all part of plan A and we are all imbued with the Christ, why is the world such a dumpster fire? Why do people torture and kill each other? And most importantly for this theology, why did Jesus have to die a brutal, bloody, horrible death on a cross?
This is section 4, the controversy. And we cannot skip this because this is where the rubber meets the road. If you change the diagnosis, you have to change the cure.
If you take away the Jesus paid the price to the angry father story, what do you do with the cross? It's the central symbol of the entire faith.
It is. And that is the absolute sticking point for the critics. If we aren't using penal substitutionary atonement, that's the fancy theological term for Jesus took our punishment, then what is the cross for? Is it just a tragic accident? An example of good man being killed by bad people?
So how does Rohr explain it? How does the plan A theology make sense of the crucifixion?
Rohr reframes the cross completely. He says it wasn't a transaction to change God's mind about us. God didn't need to be changed. God has always loved us from the beginning. The problem isn't with God, it's with us. We're the ones who don't know how to handle love, power, and pain.
So God wasn't the angry one in the equation?
No. Rohr says the cross wasn't about God needing blood to forgive. He says that turns God into a pagan deity, a monster who needs a human sacrifice to be appeased. He has a line. He says, God is not a torturer.
Okay, so if it wasn't a payment, what was it?
Instead, Rohr views the cross as an act of absolute solidarity. He loves to play with the word atonement. He splits it into at-one-ment.
At-one-ment, becoming one with.
The idea is that God, in Jesus, entered into the very worst part of human existence, pain, betrayal, humiliation, torture, death, to show that he is with us in it. God doesn't stand apart from our suffering. God enters it.
So God isn't the one inflicting the pain from above. God is the one on the cross absorbing it.
Exactly. Jesus absorbed all the hatred, violence, and scapegoating of humanity. He let us do our worst to him, and what did he give back? Only forgiveness. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they are doing. It was a demonstration. It was a revelation of a new way to be human, a way to break the cycle of violence by absorbing it and not returning it. It shows that love is stronger than death.
So it reveals God's vulnerability, not his wrath.
Yes, but, and here's where Matthew Dowling and the other critics step in forcefully. They say this isn't enough. This is a nice therapeutic idea, but it's not the gospel.
Let's give the critics the mic for a minute, because Dowling has a point that I think a lot of people would feel in their gut.
He does. Dowling's primary critique, and that of others, is that by focusing so much on this cosmic Christ and original goodness, Rohr dramatically downplays the reality and severity of sin.
They say sin isn't just disconnection or forgetting who we are. It's active rebellion. It's a choice.
Right. Dowling says, look at the Holocaust. Look at the Rwandan genocide. Look at child abuse. Is that just someone forgetting they are part of the dance? No. That is active, malicious evil. It is an objective offense against a holy God, and it has real victims.
And they argue that simply waking up or having a new consciousness isn't enough to fix that. That feels cheap.
They argue you need atonement in the classical sense. You need justice. They believe the traditional view that Jesus died for our sins to pay a real debt provides a deep psychological and spiritual need for justice to be satisfied. If someone hurt my family, I want to know that justice was done. The scales have to be balanced.
And if I hurt someone, I want to know my debt is truly paid and I can be forgiven, not just told to think differently.
Exactly. Critics worry that Rohr's view turns salvation into a mental game, a change of consciousness, rather than a real objective rescue from a real objective problem called sin. That's critique number one. It downplays sin.
And what's the second critique? There's a fear of New Age thinking, right?
Yes, this is Philip St. Romain's main concern. He worries about the blurring of the lines between God and creation. If the universe is the body of God, do we start worshiping the earth? Do we lose the crucial distinction between the creator and the creature?
That brings us back to the pantheism worry. Is the universe God?
It does. While Rohr insists he's a panentheist, critics like St. Romain are not convinced. They feel he gets too close to the line. They insist we need to keep God holy and other. If God is too mixed up with the messy and sometimes ugly world, he loses his divine authority and transcendence.
Okay, that makes sense. There's also a textual argument too, right? They don't just disagree philosophically. They say Rohr is misreading the Bible.
Oh, this is a huge one for someone like Dowling. Yeah. He argues that when the Apostle Paul wrote Christ, he meant Jesus of Nazareth, uniquely, exclusively. He wasn't talking about a cosmic blueprint or an energy field. He was talking about a specific person who died and rose again. They argue Rohr is taking a modern universalist philosophy and pasting it onto ancient texts,
making the Bible say what he wants it to say instead of what it actually says.
That's the accusation. And it's a serious one for anyone who holds the Bible as their primary authority. It becomes a battle over who gets to interpret the sacred text. Is it the literalists who focus on the historical particulars? Or the mystics who look for the universal patterns?
So we have the downplaying of sin, the danger of pantheism, and the question of biblical accuracy. Is there a fourth critique?
Yes, and it's related to the first one. It's the loss of a need for atonement. The critics maintain that the traditional view that Jesus died for sins provides necessary justice and, crucially, a mechanism for profound relief from guilt. A purely mystical or at-one-ment view might miss out on that powerful moment of release that comes from knowing a debt has been paid.
It feels like a clash of operating systems. One is legal and juridical courts, debts, justice. The other is mystical and relational, dances, flows, union.
And honestly, most people struggle to hold both. You usually find yourself leaning one way or the other based on your temperament and your experience.
So we've laid out the history, the core theology of both sides, and the fight. But I want to land this plane on the ground. Let's go to section 5. Practical spirituality.
The so what section. My favorite part.
Exactly. Let's say a listener is intrigued by this plan A view. They like the idea that God is in everything, that it's all a love story. How does that change their Tuesday morning commute?
It brings us back to our friend Duns Scotus, and a concept with a great, if slightly unpronounceable name, reshapes.
Reshapes. Sounds very Latin.
It is. It translates roughly to thisness.
Thisness.
This is crucial, because when we talk about a universal Christ, it's very easy to get vague and abstract. Oh, God is in everything generally. But Scotus said no. God's presence isn't general. It's intensely particular. God is in this specific thing.
So it's not just that God loves flowers. God loves this specific, individual, unrepeatable flower right here.
Right. Reshapes is the unique, unrepeatable dignity of every specific thing. This person, this cup of coffee, this moment of sunlight coming through the window. God's love isn't a blanket. It's a pinpoint of light on every single thing.
So you can't love a concept like humanity. You can only love a real, particular human being.
Exactly. And this is where Jesus comes back in as the essential focal point.
Yeah.
Rohr argues that Jesus is the ultimate thisness of God.
How so?
God, the Trinity, the divine dance. These are vast, abstract concepts. But Jesus is a specific man from Nazareth. He shows us what the universal love looks like in 3D, in flesh and blood. He gives the abstract a face, hands, and a voice.
And that face is feeding the hungry, touching lepers, forgiving his enemies, weeping at his friend's grave.
So if Jesus is the thisness of God made visible, then our spiritual practice is to learn to see the thisness, the Christ in everything and everyone and everything else.
There is a story in the notes from Elysian about a homeless man. I found this really powerful.
Yes. This is a perfect application of the theology. She writes about walking down the street and seeing a homeless man. And usually, like most of us, she might feel pity or annoyance or maybe guilt, a social problem to be managed.
A statistic, homelessness.
Right. But then she consciously tried to view him through the lens of the cosmic Christ. And she realized, this is the body of God in a distressing disguise. This isn't just a problem, this is a sacred encounter.
The suffering of that man is, in a mystical way, the suffering of God.
It's the suffering of the cosmos. It completely changes the dynamic. You aren't just giving $1 to a beggar as an act of charity from on high. You are tending to the wounds of God. You are meeting Christ.
That connects right back to the solidarity of the cross. It's not a one-time event. It's an ongoing reality.
It is. It means we are co-suffering. The sources say we are not punished for our sins, but by our sins. Our disconnection from the flow is its own punishment. And in that suffering of disconnection, God is suffering with us, trying to call us back home.
That feels so much less lonely than the idea of a God who is watching our suffering from a distance.
It's incredibly comforting for people who are in deep pain to know that their pain is not meaningless, but is somehow held within the very life and heart of God.
It really changes the distinction between sacred and profane. That line just gets erased.
That line dissolves. If you hold this view, you don't go to church to find God. You go to church to get the eyes to see God everywhere else in the rest of your week.
The street is the church. The office is the church. The argument with your teenager is the church.
The dinner table is the altar. It's all sacramental. It's all holy ground.
Wow. We have covered a lot of ground today. I feel like we went from the Big Bang to the medieval debate halls of Paris to the inner life of the Trinity, through the fire of the critics, and back to a homeless man on a city street.
It's a journey from a small, transactional religion focused on a single event to a massive cosmic spirituality that includes all of time and space.
Let's wrap this up with an outro that summarizes that shift. We are talking about moving from sin management plan B to cosmic love plan A.
Moving from a religion based on fear and fixing a mistake to a spirituality based on trust and participating in a universal dance.
But we have to leave the listener with the tension, because this isn't a tidy package with a bow on top.
No, you have to wrestle with it. Can you truly see God in everything without losing the distinction and falling into pantheism? Can you believe in an original goodness and loving God without ignoring or downplaying the horrific reality of evil? It's not easy.
It also completely challenges the exclusive club mentality that a lot of religion is built on.
It does. If Christ is in everyone and everything, then who is in and who is out? Maybe the walls aren't as high or as solid as we've been taught to believe.
And here's the final thought I want to leave everyone with. It wasn't explicitly in the books this way, but it feels like the elephant in the room for the 21st century.
Let's hear it.
If the universe really is the body of God, if matter is the chosen vehicle for spirit, how does that fundamentally change how we treat the planet?
That is the ultimate question for our generation, isn't it?
I mean, if the Amazon rainforest is part of the first incarnation, then burning it down isn't just bad economics or poor environmental policy. It's sacrilege. It's a desecration.
It's a crucifixion of the body of God.
And if your neighbor, the one you disagree with politically, the one who drives you crazy, is carrying the unique thisness of God,
then you have to treat them with a certain reverence. You don't have to agree with them. You don't even have to like them, but you have to recognize the divine spark, the inherent dignity that's there.
So the final question is this. If Christ really is the blueprint of reality, the very grain of the universe, are we living against that grain whenever we choose disconnection, violence, or exploitation?
Are we dancing with the flow of reality, or are we constantly trying to swim upstream against the current of love?
That's the question to chew on this week. Go look for the thisness in something or someone today.
And enjoy the dance.
Thanks for diving deep with us. See you next time.